Hey guys, this is Jay Calderon with Jay Unboxing here, giving you a personal prediction for Ryan Garcia versus Javier Fortuna. And as always, this is of course just my take. Your prediction can be left down in the comments section below. Would love to hear them all. Pretty interesting fight, so certainly something I'd like to hear. Love to check that out down in the comments section below, as mentioned. So go ahead and leave all that good stuff down there below. A little bit of fight info here. We have Ryan Garcia versus Javier Fortuna, as mentioned, taking place at the Crypto.com arena in Los Angeles, California. Very, very uncool name for an arena. This will be airing live on DAZN here in the United States in the lightweight division. And as I mentioned, it's a pretty interesting fight. One that almost happened about a year or so ago, give or take. However, due to some personal issues, Garcia couldn't go through with that fight. However, we are almost there now, and it's been rescheduled, and here we are. It's really not a bad encounter. Definitely a crossroads battle. Fortuna, who feels like he's been around forever but is only 32 years old, I believe, is a former world titleist that could make one more run at gold with the win versus the younger, seemingly hungrier, at least he should be, Garcia, looking to add the most impressive name to his resume. So, both with solid talent and plenty on the line, and certainly some rebuilding to do if they pick up a loss here. So, a lot on the line and a lot of stakes, of course, so it should be fun. Let's break this one down. Now, for Garcia to win, I think you want to work the left-right combination. Fortuna is a southpaw, and those two shots in particular can do really well against southpaws, against lefties. Not to mention the fact that Garcia has a pretty solid left-right combination that he enjoys throwing regardless of the opponent and their particular stance. So throwing that left hook into a straight right-hand combination would certainly work for Garcia. It just helps you line them up positionally. It's certainly a shot he can get off, and with the speed that he has, if he can throw it and time it consistently throughout the fight, it will certainly lead to him having some success. So it's certainly a sort of selection of shots that I would suggest he gets going early and often in that encounter. I would also say don't load up. In his last encounter, I do believe that Garcia put a little too much emphasis on trying to hurt his man and get him out of there. And while I can understand why at a younger age, after a long layoff, you want to be impressive, you can't really go chasing it because it tends to mean you're a little too tight. You don't throw with the sort of smoothness that you should be throwing, and that, of course, leads to you not really putting the kind of sort of effortlessness into your work that you should. Garcia needs to get back to that a little bit more and kind of let his hands flow just a bit more. If he can do that against an older, more aged fighter in Fortuna, I think he can potentially start bossing him around that ring and have some success, but he has to let it come naturally and not try to force the action and load up on those shots. And this final key sort of ties into that, which is to vary your speed. Again, he is a very explosive fighter, but it's kind of one dimensional if you just simply try to throw the hardest, fastest shot you can possibly throw every single fight. He's going to want to vary that. This will, of course, allow for him to kind of switch up the power he puts on shots, which means he won't load up, but it will also mean that it's going to be harder for him to be timed. Fortuna is a relatively fast-handed fighter, but he's certainly not keeping up with Garcia in that department. So he's going to have to look to try and counter. If Garcia makes it harder for him to have to read his shot selection by varying both the speed and the power, quite frankly, I think that will help him confuse Fortuna and have some success on the night for him if he can get that going again pretty consistently. Consistency is key for Garcia as he continues to develop, so I'd like to see some of that in this encounter. Now, for Fortuna to win, I think you want to land the overhand left. As a southpaw, I think that's a really good shot for him to land. He throws a very good one, and what's more, it's also a shot that I think he can kind of close the gap with a little bit, especially if he tries to build into it with a double jab, kind of blind him with one or two of those, and then throw that shot over the top. When you have rangy, relatively elusive fighters because of they might, perhaps their speed, their youth, whatever it might be, you need to find explosive ways to try and close that gap without putting yourself at too much risk. That overhand left for Fortuna could be that shot. And if you can get that going, potentially rather, make Garcia kind of question some things and shell up maybe here or there. It can allow for Fortuna to come forward, which I think he needs to do in this fight, and have some success letting his hands go a bit more down the stretch. I would also say avoid the right hand. Again, as a southpaw, that's sort of your kryptonite, especially when someone has a fast, powerful one. You're going to want to naturally look to avoid that. This can be done a couple of ways. Obviously, with some movement, of course, with head movement, with a guard, obviously, kind of trying to catch and shoot, perhaps. But even a more simplistic way of doing that is simply just circling away from it. Don't walk into it. Don't allow him to line you up. And of course, jab offset his rhythm, his pace, his timing. If you can continue to do that, it's hard for him to get any kind of power going at all, especially if you're starting to bust him up with those kinds of jabs, which of course lead to those overhand lefts we were mentioning. So, in a very synergistic way, it all kind of lends itself to each other if you're Fortuna, and that's certainly something I should hope he tries to get going on the night. And finally, I would say keep your combinations tight. If you're Fortuna, you want to throw punches in bunches. You're not the biggest puncher, you're not the fastest puncher, but your volume could potentially trouble a younger fighter who hasn't exactly been in that kind of firefight. He's had some, moments where he's had to dig deep against Luke Campbell when he was dropped pretty hard, but he hasn't had to be in a real firefight where there was back and forth action. For Fortuna, I think he needs to do that. However, it needs to be done in a calculated way. It needs to be what I would call calculated aggression, where you're not just throwing your chin up into the air and hoping he doesn't tag it. You have to kind of put your shots together in a comprehensive way. Keep the combinations tight, throw them quickly as you can. Don't always go for power. And make sure that you're being defensively responsible. If you can do that, you at least give yourself a shot of making something happen on fight night. While Fortuna is what I would call a live dog, despite the odds that we will get into here in a little bit, my pick here is with Ryan Garcia. This comes down to a few things. For starters, whenever Fortuna seems to step up, with maybe one exception against Robert Easter, who I think he probably should have beaten in their fight, he seems to come up just a bit short. Meanwhile, Garcia hasn't fought on what I would call quite that same level just yet, but he seems to have the speed and power that could nonetheless be the difference maker. And more or less, that's what I think this one will come down to. I think Fortuna will keep it cagey at times, especially early, but I think Garcia finds his rhythm and starts pushing Fortuna back after a while with his offense, especially that left right combination, as I mentioned. The right hand in particular will be what serves Garcia best, as he can line that shot up just right and possibly hurt Fortuna. In a somewhat close fight at first, I think Garcia's speed allows for him to stun Fortuna, drop him, and eventually get him out of there. Maybe even a bit earlier than some might suspect. My pick is Ryan Garcia via mid-fight stoppage. Now, the betting odds here have Garcia as a very sizable favorite. He's coming in at a minus 750, with Fortuna coming in at a plus 470. So, very good value in a Fortuna pick if you're someone that just happens to see an upset, if you think Fortuna has something that maybe other people aren't seeing, or if you just flat out hate Garcia and would love to have yet another reason to root for him. Those are some pretty decent odds there. You're basically getting 5-1 dog odds. I mean, why not throw a little bit of money there if you have it and kind of have a sort of inkling something might happen? No real value in a straight up money bet for Garcia. Possibly a decent line that you could check for when the fight gets a little bit closer is perhaps the line on whether or not this goes to a decision. I think a lot of people think Garcia perhaps stops Fortuna, especially when you see odds that wide. Maybe think about maybe a decision win for Garcia. Again, Fortuna's a cagey vet. If he gets in some trouble late, he possibly could try and see out at the very least, lasting a bit longer in the fight. Again, while I do think he gets stopped early, that's a sensible bet depending on what you kind of get for odds. But in any event, from the odds that I was able to find, that's all I have. So there are your odds. And my prediction record heading into this encounter as of July 9th, 2022 is 22 wins, 8 wrong because I got murdered with my last couple of picks, and no ties with 6 exact. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Would love to hear your thoughts, predictions, bets, so on and so forth. Of course, especially with this one because you do have some wide odds there. So I'd like to see what you guys have there. Please be sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, and follow me on Twitter at jcalderon_JOB. You can email me at junboxing@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you there. Also, be sure to check out junboxing.com for schedule, results, betting odds, rankings, and more, all that good stuff, of course. And as always, until next time.